Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online PTS test video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I'm going to be going over my findings and what I found on the PTS, and also go over some other things that I researched and studied because I noticed a pattern to some things and I wanted it to verify what my findings were and just basically go over, okay, yeah, I'm pretty much 100% on this kind of thing. But let's go ahead and talk about what my findings were first. Then I'll go over the research stuff I did and the findings from that. And then I'm also going to go into talking a little bit about what standardized and homogenized means, so people get a greater understanding of that, because a lot of people are throwing around the word homogenize a lot, and it doesn't mean what they think. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First off, to all the people out there saying that the game is being homogenized and standardized, standardized means they're using things of similar value or design, but with different properties and effects. That's what standardized means, okay? The best way you can see what standardized means is looking at gear sets and skills. To some degree skills, but mostly in the gear sets. Gear sets have more standardized structure than skills do. And I'll get to that in a second. Next up, homogenized. Homogenized means to be made uniform or similar. Okay? The skills were already uniform and similar to begin with because they had either the same radius of effect or conal shape or path shape. They basically took the structure of how spells and abilities work in D&D and they put it into this game using that same format. If you guys don't know, in Dungeons and Dragons, we use templates to basically say, okay, you're using this arrow shot ability, which can fire 5 arrows at one time as a ranger. Boom, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be a cone, and it's going to reach this diameter. We actually cut these things out on paper, and then use it on graph paper so we can show the players what it looks like. They can't do that in this game. Instead, they got to make everything work in a fast-paced setting, so they take the concept or the conceptual idea and incorporate it into the game using those parameters. The conal, the AoE, those things. This is what I mean by similar. So when I said that then the standardized means they use things of a similar fashion, but with different properties and effects, that's what I mean. So when you look at like skills, for example, we're going to go to my back bar here where I have some skills set up there, AoE damage over time abilities. You'll see they work in a similar fashion, but they have different properties and effects. The properties and effects change the cost, change how things work and all that stuff within the ability. They work in a similar fashion. Doesn't mean they're uniform or similar identically. It means that they work in a similar fashion, but they have different properties and effects. So let's take a look at Blazing Spear. This ability has a 25 meter range, 8 meter radius, 8 second duration, has a cost of almost 3k, does X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over time, and it is a synergy. Okay? The next ability we're going to look at is Ritual of Retribution, because a lot of people are talking about this. This has a 12 meter radius around the caster with a 12 second duration, a 5k cost almost, with the removal of 2 harmful effects. It can apply to, it can heal X amount of, or all your allies in the area of that 12 meters, and do damage to any enemies within the 12 meters. And it also has a synergy. Now, it does have 30% movement speed reduction, but so does this ability. And that's because of the Restoring Light passive, Sacred Ground. Enemies standing in your cleansing ritual, Ruin of Focus, or Rite of Passage get this 30% movement speed reduction. This is your cleansing ritual, your Ruin Focus, and your Rite of Passage. So anyone standing within the AoE circumference of this gets that reduced movement speed of 30%. It doesn't matter. It's part of the class's passive effects. So it is not something that's actually attached to the skill itself. It's attached to multiple skills because it is a passive effect. So we can't include that 30% damage or speed reduction. We can only take what the ability does. A synergy, a damage over time, a heal over time, and removal of 2 harmful effects from the caster. Okay? Now, because of that, it has a greater cost because of its duration and its radius. Now let's look at the next ability. This ability has a 7 meter radius, 28 meter range that it can be cast in or applied in, and an 8-second duration. That means I can cast this ability anywhere within this 28 meter range. See that 28 meter range? I can't go any further with it because it won't let me. So that's 28 meters out. If I fire this ability right here, that's exactly 28 meters out, and it will cover a circumference of 7 meters. Over the 8-second duration, it will only deal damage. It doesn't do anything else passively to reduce movement speed or anything else, because I'm not using any gear sets or anything that amplifies that process. It just does damage over time. And it costs really cheap. The next ability is called Razor Caltrops. Now, they did do a change to this skill, this update. This skill used to do damage up front, damage over time, and reduce the movement speed of the enemies by 30%. What they did to this was they turned it more into the type of ability it was meant to be. Razor Caltrops was meant to be an ability that was a crowd control ability. It was supposed to be more effective at crowd control. They adjusted it, and now does that. But another reason why I think they adjusted it is because of how it was being used. But it does damage over time every second to enemies standing within, and it has a 28 meter range, same as the bow. It has an 8 meter radius, 1 meter greater than Endless Hail. Has a 10-second duration, which is 2 seconds greater than Endless Hail. And on top of that, it applies Major Fracture to all targets, and not all targets, a maximum of 6 targets. It can apply Major Fracture to. The damage over time it can apply to as many targets that are there. So 20 targets it can do the damage over time. But it can only apply to 6 targets the Major Fracture. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. I got 2 target setups here. I got one group of target dummies with in a group of 9, and then I got a group of 6. This is how I learned that it only applies to 6 targets at a time. So here's Razor Caltrops. I'm going to go around. You'll see that some of them have the Caltrops effect, some do not have the fracture effect. And everything that's applied to them, the damage over time, the fracture, and the major movement speed is applied. The movement speed and damage over time is applied to multiple targets. The fracture is only placed to a maximum of 6. So here we go with the fracture. And again, you can see every target here has Caltrops and fracture applied to it, and the movement speed reduction. So it only applies to 6 targets, but fracture stays for the duration. So it doesn't just stay for 10 seconds, it stays for 14 seconds. And that's because on the last tick of damage, it reapplies fracture again. See, if you watch, the fracture is the circular symbol underneath their health bar. And you see as it's going down, it's getting reapplied every second. And on that last second of damage, it gets reapplied again for 4 seconds. So you get 12 or 14 seconds of major fracture applied. That is the longest duration of major fracture in the game besides Sword and Shield. Puncture or Ransack or Pierce Armor. Now, I get where a lot of people are frustrated with that change, but here's the thing I noticed when I was doing my PTS parse testing with DPS. Okay, so for DPS, depending on the build, the set combinations, I should say, the traits, the enchants, and all that stuff I was using, when I did my own custom builds and I wasn't following the meta, I was only seeing a difference of anywhere between 500 and 2,000 damage loss or increase, and it varied based on the skills, the gear sets, and everything else that I was using. In the case of this one, there's a 2,000 point increase in damage, because I changed how this one works. This is the Lord Knight, by the way, and it is getting an overhaul. Okay, but not to the degree that it had. I mean, it works similar to how it was before. It just doesn't do minor maim. But I am going to put that set back on it to test it with the minor maim. Right now I'm using automatons, and the damage difference between automatons and Nightmare is roughly about 2,000 damage. And that's because I'm getting 450 extra damage applied to all physical damage I do. So that's every ability I use, pretty much. Except for one. So this doesn't do physical damage, does magic damage, but this does physical damage, this does physical damage, this does physical damage. And when I have my bow bar set up, I have the Finder's Guild ability, Barb Trap, which does physical damage. So this is getting that extra 450 weapon damage. The one ability on the back bar that I don't get the physical damage increase from is the Venom Arrow. So Venom Arrow isn't getting the physical damage increase, it's getting poison, it's just getting weapon damage increase to poison damage itself up front and damage over time. And this is getting the physical damage increase, and this is getting the physical damage increase. So this is why I'm seeing this build work better with automatons, Kvetch's Gladiator, and the Silistrix. Now the other build that I was running Night Mother's Gaze to apply Major Fracture. I don't need it anymore, so I can use Kvetch's with it. So Kvetch's, Silistrix, and Nightmare, I'm getting about a 2,000 point difference in my DPS. And that's a 2,000 point loss when using Nightmare over automatons. Now, I noticed this when I did all the testing with all the different classes. Now, the largest discrepancy in damage that I saw was races. When I would test with races, I would see a 3,000 to 5,000 point discrepancy depending on the build and depending on the race. So if I was doing a stamina build and I was testing with a high elf, there was more of a 3,000 to 5,000 point discrepancy because it would incorporate that extra 2,000 on top of 3,000. Otherwise, there was a 3,000 point discrepancy most of the time. So this is what I noticed when I was testing with the way I do builds. Not the meta builds, the way I do them. When I tested with meta, depending on the race, or depending on the class, gear combinations, traits, Mundus Stones, all that stuff, there was anywhere between a 5k and a 15,000 point loss most of the time. In some cases, there would be instances where some classes would actually get an increase in DPS on the stamina side and the magicka side, but it was very small. It was usually within a 1,000 to 3,000 point increase. I saw the largest discrepancy again between races, but the biggest hit on this update is directly against the meta. Okay? So when I saw this, and I was like, okay, why would they be hurting the meta so bad? You know, why is this happening to the meta? And it's not the meta just for PvE, by the way. Everything that's happening is the meta for PvE and PvP. So I got to wondering, why would they put these changes in that's directly affecting this one demographic? So I went back and I did some research on other patch notes going back to 1 Tamriel, as far back as 1 Tamriel. And that's because 1 Tamriel was what changed the foundations of how this game worked. I didn't go back any further because there was really no point. Because before that, the game's design and structure was completely different. When they did 1 Tamriel, they made the world open-ended. So you could go anywhere in the world at any time, at any level, and play the content. It didn't matter what it was. The only content you couldn't play until level 10 was PvP. Everything else, including trials, could be played by anyone of any level. The difficulty was the thing that changed, and it changed at level 45. So you couldn't do veteran content until you hit level 45 if you go to the content. You can't do veteran DLC stuff through the group finder until you hit certain CP levels. And that was one of the things they put into the group finder itself. Not into the rest of the game, just the group finder. So that is something I learned. The other thing that I learned is every time they've made major sweeping changes to the game in namely skills and traits, Mundus stones, when they've done that stuff, it's been to directly affect how the meta was using that stuff. Now, the meta wasn't abusing sets, they were abusing skills, abilities, traits, and Mundus stones. And they were taking advantage of them because that's what they do. Okay? And it's nothing against the meta. The meta's going to do this regardless because they will always play to the best they can because the devs put a tool in the game, put something in the game to make the end game competitive. Not only on the PvP side, but also the PvE side. Arenas and trials have scoreboards attached to them. Where are people playing the content for scores? In those things. What are they doing when they play that content? They're using very atypical or asymmetrical builds. They use a very homogenized build structure. Homogenized means uniform or similar. If you take every build that this meta does, they use the same sets, the same skill format for every build, no matter what class it is. The only time that it changes is on the Magicka side, and mostly the only thing that changes on the Magicka side depends on the class, and even then, a lot of times they stick to the same sets on all classes. When I tested with the meta, the greatest hit in damage was to the Magicka side, and it was mainly Sorks. Do you know why Sorks got hit so bad? Because Sorks don't have a direct damage over time ability in their class. The meta doesn't use a direct damage over time, single target ability in the build. When I switched it to using one of those, my damage went back to being comparable with everyone else's. Changed one ability, and my damage just all of a sudden went right back to where it was. And I was only seeing like a 5k loss in DPS, not a 10k or 15k, a 5k loss. And the reason for that is because all the other stuff was getting a 5k loss, or it was getting an increase. And a lot of the increase came on the stamina side, which isn't good. Because now the devs have to look at this stuff and then alter it again. But now that they've standardized how skills work, they're going to get a better chance at doing this. Now I'm going to show you guys what standardized means. I already showed you the skills, but I'm going to show you what standardized sets look like. Because a lot of people don't realize sets in this game are standardized also. So I did a comparison test. I took Hunting's Rage, Kvetch's Gladiator, and Night Mother's Gaze, put it on this character, on a character like this, and I didn't change my monster set or my other gear set. I just changed the one 5-piece body set. When I ran with Kvetch's Gladiator, Hunting's Rage, and Night Mother's Gaze, what do you think the difference in my DPS was? How much of a variable difference do you think there was? You guys are going to probably, a lot of you are probably going to say there was a big variable difference. It depended on the class, and it depended on what skills I was using. There would be a larger variable difference. But if I was using Razor Caltrops on all the builds, no difference in DPS. In fact, it was a 100 to 500 point difference in DPS. When I tested Reliquin against Vicious Serpent, Briarheart and all this, and I'm not talking Perfect Reliquin, I'm talking the basic Reliquin. Because Perfect Reliquin gives a new parameter or new value to the build that the other builds don't have. So it actually gains something they don't have. So I use the imperfect versions to test with. So Reliquin, Vicious Serpent, Briarheart, I tested with other dungeon sets too. In comparison, along with Kvetch's Gladiator and everything, what do you think the DPS difference between those sets was? How big of a difference? I'm going to tell you right now. There was a 2k difference maximum. Standardizing means to put things in a similar working function, but with different properties and values. Okay? The sets are already standardized. They already give us a working value system that puts us within a 2k range, and it's mainly Reliquin that puts us in that 2k range. So when I test Reliquin with automatons on a Templar, and then I tested automatons, or I tested not Reliquin, but Hunting's Rage with automatons, or sorry, with Alkosh, and that combination, how far do you think my DPS was off? A lot of you are probably going to say a lot, because Alkosh doesn't compare to Reliquins and DPS. But you're forgetting about the other combinations into that. See, Cellatrix and the other set were still applied. So they were still getting the comparable benefits. Hunting's Rage, Night Mother's Gaze, Reliquins, all that are what I call crit dynamic sets. They all work within the crit formula. They all have 2 crit, and this is going from the 2 to 4 piece, because these are your what is called the attribute modifiers. These are the ones that affect your character's attributes the most, is the 2 to 4 piece. Okay? The 5 piece bonus is what changes on most builds, or on most gear sets. So the 2 to 4 piece on this is critical weapon damage. What do you think it is on Hunting's Rage and Night Mother's Gaze? Night Mother's Gaze is critical weapon damage. Hunting's Rage is critical max stamina. What do you think it is on Reliquin? Critical minor slayer. What do you think it is on Vicious Serpent? Critical minor slayer. What about Briarheart? Critical weapon damage. Or I think it's, yeah, no, it's stamina. Or is it weapon damage? We can look. Briarheart, yeah, it's stamina. It's the Griffin's Ferocity that is weapon damage. So if you look, a lot of the sets have a standardized attribute system between 2 and 4 piece. It's the 5 piece that's different, and it's the 5 piece that separates the sets from other sets, but keeps them within comparable levels in DPS. So this one getting the major fracture, or the minor force and the minor expedition. The minor force increases your overall damage by 10%. Even if you're using Trap Beast, you're not going to get a perfect application of minor force all the time to every target. You're going to get it to one target. This applies minor force to your character against every target. So it gives you greater DPS, but also at the same time it keeps it in comparison with those running Trap Beast. So, did a lot of testing, like I said, over this last week, with a lot of different sets, a lot of different combinations on every class, with every race. What I saw was when I was using my own custom builds, the damage loss and gain was about 2k. When I did it with the meta, it would fluctuate. It was anywhere between 5k to 15k gain or loss, and it was never a 15k gain. It was always like a 2,000 or 3,000 point gain in the rotations of what I had prior to this in the last PTS cycle. Because see, I keep track of all my records in spreadsheets or in WordPads and things like that. I keep all these things recorded on my computer so I can keep track of my testing cycles, so I can do comparisons even to previous ones. I started doing this back with in Clockwork City. I started keeping notes to every update from then. I would keep track of my parse tests, so I can do comparisons with each update to see what the differences were. So this way I could get more of a greater across the board comparison, and I could compare my notes to previous PTSs with new PTSs. And I started doing that then, and with this update it made it a lot easier for me to test things, because I could just open up my spreadsheet and go, or my Word, actually I use a WordPad. I use a spreadsheet to do everything, and then I put everything in a WordPad thing just so I can keep it saved on my computer. So I just go through my WordPad and I go, okay, so this is what I was doing with a Templar Wood Elf before in damage. Now I'm doing this. I'm doing 2k more this update than what I was doing before with the same build, because I test with the same builds all the time, because I test the same format all the time. And if I start finding discrepancies, I change that format to test with other sets. So this way I can get, again, more definitive test results. and I can get a greater range of results, so I have a bigger spectrum to work with, so I can get more variables to compare against. And I started noticing the pattern with sets a while back. Actually, back probably not Morrowind, but maybe the Clockwork City. It was probably Clockwork City when I started noticing the comparison in sets. And that's when I started doing that test where I was testing sets in combination with each other. And I remember a lot of people within the meta were complaining to me, telling me I was giving people false information, blah, 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 blah. And I immediately switched right back to doing meta testing because I was tired of getting yelled at. The same thing happens every updates. I get tired of getting yelled at by the meta community because my stuff doesn't reflect their stuff. The reason my stuff doesn't reflect their stuff is because I'm not playing with meta builds. I'm playing casual roleplay builds against meta comparisons. So this way I can get a definitive on how much of a difference we're looking at. You know what the difference between Reliquins, Automatons, and Silatrix is between Hunting's Rage Automatons and Silatrix? There's literally only like a 5-10k difference in DPS that I can pull with my builds. And it really depends on the race and the and that's it. And the class. Some classes I can pull more DPS with that than other classes, and that's because Automaton works better with Templar, Nightblade, or Templar, Sorcerer, and Warden. And that's because the 450 extra damage that it gives to physical damage, Wardens, Templars, and Nightblades gain more of in their class abilities. Or sorry, Wardens, Sorcerers, and Templars do. Necromancers, Nightblades, and Dragon Knights gain more damage with poison and disease damage. So when I test them with the Swamp Raiders, because they gain a greater benefit from that. And it's funny because like the DPS discrepancy between Swamp Raiders, Reliquin, and Silatrix, and then Reliquin, Automatons, and Silatrix, the difference, literally the damage difference is like 100 points. That's it. With my builds. This isn't the meta stuff. Like I said, meta stuff fluctuates, and that's because they make their builds in a homogenized way. They use uniform build structure. So they use the same skills, same tools, same gear sets, no matter what, with every class. And they use different races to determine the best results. Because they build around the race and gear sets, not the class and gear sets. They build around race and gear sets. Like I said, they do their best, don't get me wrong, but they always come up with the best results. And what happens is the devs don't see the changes. And this is what I'm seeing, okay? Remember, this is my perspective from looking at it from a player's side. I do not work for the company. Don't expect I do. I'm looking at it from a player perspective, and I'm looking at it going, okay, what's going on here? What's causing this change? So let me go over a few things that I noticed. So with my own changes, like I said, I've already explained that. But the things that I found through my research is that 90%, I would actually say it's more like 80% of most, or 75% of most of the content changes or combat changes to skills, traits, gear, Mundus. So a lot of that stuff has happened in reflection to how the meta plays and how people gravitate to the meta. Because if more of the community is playing meta structure or meta playstyle, that means more and more the tools in the game aren't being used. Now, the reason I'm telling you guys this is you got to remember, I did a lot of research. And one of the things that I noticed was a pattern in what the devs say. The devs have been saying this since 1 Tamriel happened. Every update, they release a trailer, they release, things where they discuss, like interviews, all kinds of stuff. Every single one of them. There is one line that they use no matter what. This game is play how you want. They have stuck to that idea since 1 Tamriel happened. And they've really enforced it more so since Morrowind, because they keep trying to get people to play to the design structure of the game. Who doesn't follow the rules of the game? The meta. Why not? Because they're always going to play to the best they can, because the devs put a tool in the game that causes a competitive aspect to the game. Scoreboards and leaderboards and scoreboards and trials and arenas. They also have them in where else? Battlegrounds. And then Cyrodiil has kind of a similar thing where the winning faction gets better rewarded. So what happened? What's happened over time? The meta players have altered how the game works. Why? Because they gravitate to playing at the best of their game, at the best they can within the game's rules. They take advantage of every aspect they can, and when people start gravitating to that stuff in the live service, that's when this stuff changes. Have you noticed that, like, during the PTS cycle, a lot of times the meta players do a lot of testing through this time? They don't release builds until roughly the week after PTS ends, like during the launch, like not the launch week, they might even wait a week after. It goes live on the from PTS to the PC and Mac. They start releasing builds and stuff, because that gives them time to test on the live servers within their guilds the best setups that they found from testing on the PTS. So this way they have verifiable fact that it works. Then they start sharing their ideas with the community. The community goes and search online to see where these major changes are happening, what's happening, and you see it start on the forums the day PTS happens. The first day of PTS, people start asking, what's the best race to use now? What's the best class to use now? What's the best skills to use now? All this kind of stuff. But then there's a lot of complaining. 90% of the complaints that come in over the forums is from the meta community, in PvE and in PvP. I've been watching and following the people who react the most on the forums. It's the same people every update. It's the PvE meta crowd and it's the PvP meta crowd that is the greatest vocal community on the forums. Do you see them? Do you see the devs listening to these guys on changing things to stay to the meta formation? No. They keep pushing these patches through, because they know that they aren't trying to make the game for the meta, they're trying to make it for the game's design, which is play how you want. And this is the things that I'm noticing from my PTS test this cycle. I didn't just do testing, like I said, with builds and damage dealers, tanks, and healers. I also did research to backtrack into other things to see why a lot of these changes keep happening, because I noticed a pattern that every update, the vocal community that gripes on the forums the most is the meta community. Because every time you turn around, at least 75% of the changes that are happening to the game directly affect the meta the most. It hurts them the most, not the casual role players that play the game to play it for fun. It affects those who follow under the meta design and structure. And this is going to happen all the time, because the meta will never change. The meta will always continue to create the best options. Why? Because they want those better score runs. They want to be progressive. What happens is this shows the devs the things that are being misused and not being used as intended by design of the game. Let's talk about synergies real quick. Have you ever noticed that synergies are primarily used now in the meta community, both in PvP and in PvP, PvE and PvP, primarily by healers, not support characters, healers. Remember, any character in this game can play a support character. It's not just tanks and healers. Anyone can use support sets along with damage sets, along with other things, and still get a good, decent amount of DPS out of it. But the meta's not doing that. The meta's making the tanks and healers support. In PvP, the meta's different, but in a lot of ways similar. They use a lot of the same tactics that they use in PvE and PvP. So they use orbs and springs and rapid regeneration in PvE and in PvP. this becomes mainstay. And that's because the community gravitates to the use of these abilities. Well, Rapid Regeneration was more roleplay casual, but Healing Springs and Orbs was being used by a major amount of players in the meta community, both at in-game PvE and PvP. The skills weren't designed to be used that way. That's why we have two morphs of orbs, one that's damage dealing and one that's healing. The damage dealing one is meant to be used by group members of the damage dealing type, or even healers if they want extra DPS. But nobody was using it that way. They were making healers use it only. Orbs was nerfed. Look at Healing Springs. They were using it as a spammable heal because you could spam heal this and even crit heal as high as 6 to 7k with it on the initial hit. They nerfed it. They made it to where it worked as intended, a heal over time. It is no longer a spammable heal because it was never intended to be that way. The meta was using it that way. In PvE and in PvP. I watched a lot of videos too to see, to try and catch this stuff. There's a lot of PvP videos where you'll see them taking a keep, and you'll see a lot of like healers throwing springs and orbs out at the people taking the keep, like fighting at the gates and stuff. And this is so they could feed them resources. And they could feed them heals, because orbs take time to travel, so they could hit more targets as they traveled along. Springs covered a greater radius, but they were spamming springs. They were doing it in PvP. They were also doing it in trials. The game's intention of design was not that way. The game is supposed to be played how you want, not to a strict, restricted structure like World of Warcraft. And that's the other thing that a lot of people are misinterpreting or misunderstanding about a lot of the things I say. When I say that every set in this game has its viability, it does. It does because it's meant to work in a certain combination. If you look at sets and their things, you have critical sets and then you have offsets. Offsets are the sets that don't offer the same benefits as critical sets. So if you take like Julianus, Caloran's Legacy, Wise Mage, Infallible Aether, Mad Tinkers, all those things, and you put them side by side, you'll see the 2 to 4 piece is very similar, and even throw Combat Physician in there. Very similar. But then the 5 piece is different. Then you look at all the other sets. All the other sets offer things like 1 crit, 1 spell damage, max magicka, 2 things of spell damage, or max magicka, or whatever. They're offsets from the crit sets. And this is a pattern I noticed long ago, and I tried to bring this up, but people kept shooting me down, telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. But apparently I knew something was going on because I saw a pattern with the sets. They were standardized. All sets work in a similar fashion. Look at Netch's Touch. Netch's Touch, Iskamir, the Soulfire, or whatever it is, set. And that's a heavy armor set, along with the the sets that give you spell crit, either max health or max magicka spell damage with 450 to a certain type of damage type. You look at all those and you put them in comparison. They're identical in every way, shape, or form. They just have different property of effects. They're standardized. They all work in a standard format or formula, but it's to boost the effects of other things. There's even the destruction staff one. I think it's called Spiders something or other. That works in the same fashion. It boosts your destruction staff damage by 450. Then there's one that boosts your channeled effects by 450. All of these sets apply to different classes in different ways. Some are more beneficial on some classes over other classes. Why is that? So that this way you have options and varieties in ways that you can play your character. See, there's a reason why they give us so many different gear sets, and they keep adding new gear sets. It's to add diversity and variety to build structure. So this way we're not playing just the same build over and over and over within the meta format. We have options of different sets to use. So what I did was I tested Hunting's Rage, all these different sets in comparison with each other, on a target dummy with the same offset on different classes to see what the difference in variables was. Now, when I was testing the automatons one, that's when I noticed that the Dragon Knight, the Nightblade, and the Necromancer weren't gaining as much of a benefit from it. And that's because it applies to physical damage only. When I switched to Swamp Raiders, it was more comparable, within a 100-point range. And then it didn't matter what race I was playing because it was always going to be within a 100-point range depending on the race. So that's the things that I noticed while I was testing. But I noticed even more. Like I said, 75% of most combat changes that happen with most of the PTS cycles, or most of the major changes that happen before they go live, 75% of those changes directly affect the meta. Not the casual roleplay, not the people who just play the game to have fun, or like different, just like to play the game and play how you want. Those people barely get affected by this stuff. And that's because they don't play to the same standards as the meta. They don't care. They just play the game. They use the builds they like to play with, and they play with them. Sometimes those will be affected if they see people sharing those ideas and people gravitating to those ideas. See, the meta gets shared a lot. If you go and search on the forums or on the websites or on YouTube for a build, 90% of the time it's going to be directing you to a meta build. When people see this, they gravitate to it because that's all they're finding. They don't know how everything works in the game. Neither do I. Neither do the meta people. We know what works best based on how we test things. And we go off of that. But that's why you're seeing so many different changes, is because I'm seeing a trend here. The devs are trying to keep the game play how you want. The meta community is trying to make the game more like World of Warcraft play, where you play specific classes with specific roles because they work the best. Have you seen the meta play Sorcerer tanks or play Nightblade tanks or play Templar tanks within their group dynamics? No, they're using DK tanks because to them the DK is the best overall tank, mathematically. But every class is supposed to be able to be a tank. Do you know why the meta complains every time that the devs do changes to try and bring other classes in line with the DK? And they don't put it identical to the DK? Because every class is meant to work differently. If they make every class work identically, then they're homogenizing the game. They're not homogenizing the game, guys. They're standardizing how things work, so this way things feel similar, but also work with different properties and effects. That's still why the DK and Templar, when it comes to tanking, don't work identically. Is so that there's different variations of ways to play tanks with each class, within each combination of sets. There's different ways to play every class as every role, no matter what, because they give you the tools necessary to create the build that is going to be most effective for you as a player in that structure. That's why they keep adding new sets. That's why they keep adding new skill lines. That's why they keep doing this stuff. They keep adjusting things, is because the meta players take advantage of it. Now, it's not negative on the meta. This is a good thing that the meta does this, because then it allows the devs to see the flaws in their own game to where they can make adjustments to the game and the rules of the game to fit into their design structure, which is play how you want. And that's what I see. And that's it. So I'm going to leave it at that with this. Tomorrow's patch notes will be on the PTS, hopefully in the morning, and I'll be able to share those with you guys when they come out. I'm going to do a video on it. I'm gonna see how they're set up. If there's not a lot of things that I need to separate, I'll just do it in one video, which most likely that'll be the case. I'll be able to do it all in one video, because the other thing I noticed between PTSs, the patch notes, is that every PTS, there's the 5 patches, and within that there's a pattern. There's 2 patches where they just do minor changes, then they do the 3rd patch where there's big changes, and then they do the 4th patch, which is minor changes, then they do release. That's how the PTS cycle always happens. And they've been following this pattern for a long time. There was one time where they made the mistake of not following that pattern, and this was during the time that they changed all the crit structure, and the meta started jumping on the crit bandwagon and trying to make all these super crit builds, and everyone was like, oh cool, we're going to be using Mother Sorrows and Julianus and da-da-da, and everyone's like, yeah. They started to follow that before it came off of PTS. The devs changed that right before PTS launched, nerfed it, pissed everyone off because it happened right at the last second. And everyone on the live servers was already starting to change their builds to that, because the meta jumped the gun. See, I never jump the gun with my builds. I just start releasing builds when I feel like it's a good time, and it's usually after the 3rd patch is when I start releasing builds. And during that time, there's going to be some minor changes, but not enough that would affect how a build works. A lot of the changes that happen are to the mechanics of dungeons and trials, or to the some minor stuff to some skills and some other stuff. But it's never anything, like I said, that detrimentally affects how builds work. That stuff happens between week 1 and week 3. Week 4 and 5, or week 4, nothing really happens. When week 5 happens, it launches. So that's what we see. So the first 2 weeks is minor changes. The 3rd week, major changes. 4th week, minor changes. 5th week, release. So expect this DLC to come out the 12th, roughly, for PC and Mac, 26th for the consoles, because they always do it and it's not the 26th, it's the 27th, because consoles get released on Tuesday, not Monday. How do I know this? Simple math. Really. But that's pretty much it, guys. That's what I've learned from my testing and everything. And if you don't believe these patterns, go back and look at older PTS notes. Go back and look at this stuff. Watch YouTube videos. Watch who complains the most on the forums. 90% of the complaints on the forums come from meta people. And it's people who follow within the meta guidelines that are losing their cookies over this update. Because everything that's being directly affected is being affected meta first. And that's it. So we'll leave it at that. Moving on, you guys know what's coming next. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.